Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics. Proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory, prices, and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello, hello.
Ruben Bressler.
Oh, hi, how are you?
Fan-freaking-tastic. Now,
good.
We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most prolific and letting us know what card we didn't choose as one of our top 10 modal cards. Ruben?
Well, this week's winner is Rocco M., who wrote down, "Its older, more flashy brothers aside, I think it's only appropriate to show some love for Atarka's Command. Its resume in Standard includes a Pro Tour win at Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir and a top 8 at Pro Tour Battle of Zendikar. In Modern, it stands as a staple in decks such as Naya Burn and my personal favorite, Bushwhacker Zoo. For the insanely low price of 2 mana, it's a Skullcrack and Anthem, instant speed ramp, and easily one of the most versatile spells a red aggressive mage can have at their disposal. There are few things as satisfying as winning on the crackback after an affinity player goes all in on Inkmoth Nexus, only to forget that in addition to buffing your creatures +1/+1, it also gains reach."
Nice.
Yeah.
It was a nice little wrap-up of what Atarka's Command does, and of course I'm going to pick the bird spell. That was really close to my list. A couple of the charms were right outside the top 10, and Atarka's Command certainly deserves a mention.
Wow. So so congratulations to him. Please hit us up on Twitter. I don't know a much better way to get a hold of us, honestly.
Sure.
We pay attention on Twitter. Hit us up on Twitter. I know not everybody uses it, but okay. At Magic Mike's Cast or at Mr. Orange, we will figure a way to get you your
We are on Reddit. I have had a listener to send me messages there if they don't have Twitter accounts. So if Twitter's not your jam, I tend to spend more time on the subreddit than the boys do, but you can send me a message and say, "Hey girl, I'm your winner," and that works too.
And we'll get you your prize, 100%.
We'll find you.
Now,
or you can just walk into a Cool Stuff Inc. store and demand to see Evan Irwin.
He needs to be here now.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington style. Just
That's
wander
right.
in. Yeah, I demand satisfaction, etc.
Well, I know it's going to be interesting this week for our Dimir cards, as I have 4 hires in the same. Ruben weirdly also has the exact same 4 hires in the same exact same numbers.
And that's like hard to do. Like the same, obviously being the same is going to be the same.
Sure.
But the hires are weird. The fact that we have 4 hires in the same spots on the list is X-Filesy.
I have 2 hires, and that's all. So
all right,
awesome.
Good.
It's cool. I'm used to doing the heavy lifting. It's fine. So.
Right. Well, you're the only one that is somewhat disconnected from the hive mind. You're the only one that can think for themselves. So.
Well, I'll go ahead and kick off our number 10 here with a new card. Just showed up in Ixalan, because I really do think that Wizards has pushed the envelope, and Hostage Taker is an incredible Magic card, particularly now that we've been able to see it in play for a few tournaments now. It's a black, a blue, and 2 generic mana for a rare from Ixalan. It is a 2/3 human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So it was eroded to target another target creature. You can't target Hostage Taker with its own ability.
Right.
I mean, obviously, but okay, whatever.
Sure.
But the raw power of this card has just begun to show itself over and over again. And I feel like I don't want to sort of sleep on it, and I don't want to say that when I went back and was talking about the Dimir cards, just because it's new doesn't mean it can't be one of the best, because
sure.
I think this is one of the best black-blue cards ever made. They pushed the power level all the way to the max, and I think this thing is going to see a ton of play for as long as it remains legal in Standard.
Yeah, I mean, Faceless Butcher had the same stats on mono black creature, but it didn't have the benefit of, first of all, being only one color. You had 2 black mana symbols in the Faceless Butcher. This one, you need 1 blue and 1 black, which in a lot of decks, especially in modern days with all these dual lands, is a lot easier to get by with. And the second thing is being able to cast it, man. I mean, I've only had experience with it in limited so far, but seeing it in action. And even in playing it in sealed at the pre-release, it was just a spectacularly powerful card. 100% agree. And there's already the video of 3 hostage takers being the only creatures on the battlefield and restarting Moto. So that's always fun.
Wow, holding Moto hostage.
Yeah, exactly, holding Moto hostage. If you recall the old LSV video with his Oblivion rings restarting the game, exact same thing happened with hostage taker. Yeah, you're 100% right, and this will live on in perpetuity that Evan had it on his list first.
For what that is worth.
Well,
so, Ruben, what is your number 10?
I went with a bit of a classic for my number 10. My number 10 is Undermine. If you all are unfamiliar, it's blue, black, rare from Invasion. Counter target spell, its controller loses 3 life. Just a very staple part of the blue-black control decks from back in the day, particularly in the Yawgmoth's Agenda control decks from the Invasion Block Pro Tour. And various other, throughout its life in Standard, it was a highly played counterspell. It was beloved by everybody almost immediately. It was a really good precursor to Counter Squall. It was a just a staple part of those control decks back in the day when Force Spike or Duress just couldn't cut it. You could always keep up your Undermine, and it led to all of the other 3-mana counterspells that have like slight effects, like Dissipate and Dissolve and things like that. I'm just a big fan of Undermine, and yeah, it was part of a cycle originally with Absorb and Suffocating Blast that dealt 3 damage to a creature, and Mystic Snake, which is the one that got reprinted, which all were counterspells that had other things attached to them. Mystic Snake had a Grizzly Bear staple to it, and the other ones had Lightning Bolt. And this one had Bump in the Night, I guess, stapled to it. And it's one of my favorite spells. It's just super Dimir, it's super blue-black, and it's got a good pedigree.
There was a period of time in which, they basically stopped printing Counterspell. And this was essentially after 7th edition, where they're like, 2 blue to Counterspell is kind of a little much. So let's add mana to it, but we'll make them do interesting things. This is the multicolor set. It adds a lot of multicolor stuff. I like Undermine. I kind of chose it over other things, or I didn't choose it over other things, mainly because I felt like it's just a little too straightforward. It has a pedigree, but it's little, these days.
Do what you do and do it well, right? And also, I have a personal story with Undermine where I was playing a very long game against another deck, and they cast an Urza's Rage, and then Urza's Rage cannot be countered, but it can still be targeted by Undermine. Sure. And I targeted it 3 times and killed my opponent who was at 8 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
That's fantastic. Aaron, what is your number 10?
My number 10 is a legendary creature, or more specifically, a pair of legendary creatures, very beloved characters in the Magic storyline, specifically with regards to Innistrad block. They have even been featured in Commander sets, and very amusing duo. It's always fun sort of watching their exploits and specifically hearing their banter between the two of them. A listener even went so far as to Photoshop mine and Ruben's heads into this card shortly after the card came out, because we are so much like these characters. My number 10 is Gisa and Geralf.
Nice.
These two have been around for a while. Ghoulcaller Gisa is an EDH staple. Geralf certainly sees play. We've certainly seen their flavor text throughout several cards. These two are really iconic characters when you think of Innistrad. And when we went back to Innistrad as part of Shadow's block, they were given their own card in Eldritch Moon. It's 2, a blue and a black, which is really, again, just sort of the perfect combination. Gisa is known for making the black zombies. Geralf is known for more of the scabs or the blue zombies. So it's basically a combination of those colors. 4/4 human wizard, legendary creature. When Gisa and Geralf enters the battlefield, you can put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. And then during each of your turns, you can cast zombies from your graveyard. So this is everything I enjoy doing. And just more importantly, the personal resonance of, Ruben, it's us. Look at that. If we give you an eye patch and you give me a veil and a shovel, we could do this. And I just love everything about this. I was so happy they got their own card, and like I said, when I look at this now, I just think of you and I.
It's a sweet design for characters. Like, it's one of the cool things when they go back to the blocks, they can take the characters that people enjoyed the first time and go, okay, we'll give them cards now.
Yeah.
Like, I effectively want some of the Ravnica characters to get cards when we finally go back to Ravnica again, which some people are already talking about. Feather needs a card. Feather is like the Firemane Angel of Firemane Angels, the leader of the pack. Aurelia got a card. Where is Feather?
Right. But also, Imara Tandris should get a card. And I mean a real card.
Wow.
Not this. Not what happened last time.
Too soon.
Burn. It was, but that is definitely a sweet one. So, Aaron, go ahead and tell us, what is your number 9? Because I know that Ruben and I don't have one.
Well,
I would like the Aaron Campbell show for the next 15 minutes, everybody.
That's right.
Well, you spoke too soon. My number 9 is higher on somebody's list.
Ooh.
Wow. So we are literally skipping number 9, ladies and gentlemen.
Skip number 9.
Well, number 8, Aaron.
My number 8 is another beloved creature from Tarkir block. This character became a huge hit based on the art. There were lots of callbacks to between the different timelines. So we started Khans of Tarkir block.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say, yeah. And the leaders were in charge. So you had your CDC, you had your characters like that. And then dragons came around in the alternate timeline, and the dragons were in charge. And nothing says being in charge like stringing up the previous leader and wearing him as a necklace. Number 8 is Dragonlord Silumgar. When this art got spoiled, people were going, is that Tassiger on his... Is he wearing Tassiger? Oh, yeah. He put Tassiger on a necklace and is wearing Tassiger. Wow. How badass is that?
That's
like nothing says I'm boss like doing that. And so Dragonlord Silumgar is 4 a blue and a black. It's a legendary creature, Elder Dragon, flying and death touch 3/5. When it enters the battlefield, you gain control of a creature or a planeswalker for as long as you control Dragonlord Silumgar. This was a really big hit in the Esper Dragons list, which I played in Standard. The favorite thing to do with this was to steal a Gideon, because Gideon was seeing a lot of play, obviously. And then minusing it, just making an emblem and killing Gideon. And then now you have a 4/6 dragon. And so this was a really great thing to do. There were also some interesting interactions with Ojutai. If you were able to sort of catch your opponent with their, so to speak, their pants down. If they tap Ojutai no longer has hexproof, and then you swing in and steal the Ojutai. And so there were all sorts of battles with that. And being a really funny character, what he did to Tassiger and just its usefulness, it's seen a little bit of vintage play. I do believe the bug decks have kind of toyed with it a little bit. And for all those reasons, Silumgar is my number 8.
This was my number 9.
Okay.
And I certainly loved this guy from the moment I saw him, and it made a huge impact on Standard. There's definitely, there's nothing cooler than, hey, I'm such a BA that you are now part of my wardrobe. That's what you are now. You accentuate my features. And there's just nothing better than, there was a whole sort of cloud that came over Standard, which is don't ever put your planeswalkers to ultimate status, because they're going to get Dragonlord, they're going to take them, they're going to use them, like nice Ashiok, GG. There were lots of situations where Dragonlord Silumgar would really hurt people and hurt them bad, and one of the coolest blue-black cards, because not only does it take a creature, it takes planeswalkers too.
Planeswalker, absolutely. And of course, the cycle of the Elder Dragons that returned for the first time in 20 years, very iconic. We had a couple comments on our Celestia video about where Dragonlord Dromoka was, also a vintage all-star, apparently, which is great. And Cube. Obviously, the most fun I've had with Dragonlord Silumgar is taking him on a tour through Magic's history and stealing everything from every year of Magic.
Yes.
But yeah, and of course the Esper Dragons list that rampaged through Standard back in the day, very iconic card, not just an iconic character, not just an iconic art. It touches all the bases.
Absolutely. Now I know, again, I have no number 8, and neither does Ruben. So,
well, I have one, but it's higher. It's elsewhere.
We're going to get there.
Right, we'll get there eventually.
Aaron, what is your number 7?
My number 7 is a criminally underplayed card. I'm surprised that this card does not see more play than it does, especially in the older formats where everybody is fetching. Everybody's making you fetch with cards like Ghost Quarter. My number 7 is Shadow of Doubt.
Yeah.
So it has the split mana cost, courtesy of Ravnica, City of Guilds. So you can either pay, you can pay any combination of blue and black for 2. So like 2 blue and 2 black, a blue and a black, whatever tickles your fancy. It's an instant. Players can't search libraries this turn. Draw a card. So the best thing to do is in response to a fetch land, you do this, and you can't look. You can't do that. I'm always surprised this card doesn't see more play in the older formats. I know that the Grixis lists kind of play with it for a little while, but that's kind of been on the fringe. I love the flavor text of Zodek saying your ignorance is my bliss. That's so badass. The art is really creepy. It's by Greg Staples. You're not really sure what you're looking at here.
Right.
And I just love everything about this. And I just wish it saw more play because it's so, until you've been on the receiving end of it, you don't really know what it feels like. And it's probably the closest that Modern is going to come to getting a stifle. Like, we've got Disallow, and that's cute, but like it costs 3, and this just seems like as good as it's going to get.
I would be, well, first of all, this was on my short list, didn't make my top 10. However,
same.
You know, it was fun. It was weird to me that this didn't see a lot more play. I mean, it feels like such a more powerful card. Like, oh, you're going to do something? No, you can't. I draw a card. Or at the end of your turn, I just run it through the cantrip or whatever. You know, maybe in a different world or maybe in the future, they make this card again, and instead of drawing a card, it's for 1 hybrid mana, and you scry 1.
Yeah,
sure.
Players can't search libraries, scry 1. Like, that'd be a pretty sweet card for a black or a blue.
Shadow of Doubt has seen competitive play in Standard, in Extended, in Modern. I mean, it won a Pro Tour. It's like the best thing that you can have against a Dragonstorm deck. It's the best thing you can have against a Scape Shift deck. It's
Tron against the Expedition Mount.
Great against Tron. Yeah, another great one. It was really good against Ayavugan as well. And it draws you a card. I mean, it's so versatile that you can put it in your main deck and just cycle through it like it's an Azorius Charm or something. Yeah, this was literally my number 11. I was trying to find room for it on my list. I'm glad that we got to talk about it at least during the show because it is a unique, special animal in the world of Magic, and I do hope that they reprint the effect at some point.
I agree. All right, so Ruben, what is your number 6?
My number 6, I finally get to talk about a card. Also has Pro Tour pedigree, got reprinted, and it's also not really. It didn't really get verbified. So much as when you say, I'm going to lobotomy you for something, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you know that cranial extraction or quash or splinter or something that does that effect is happening.
Memoricide.
Right. So, Memoricide is another great example. My number 6 is lobotomy. Nice. Originally from Tempest, 2 colorless blue and a black, got reprinted in Invasion. It basically duresses you and then makes you forget that you duressed any that you ever had it in your deck. Yeah. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player exiles that card, and then you go through that player's hand, library, and discard pile for all of the copies of it and remove them from the game, or now exile them. This is a card that was a staple of the very, very early blue-black control decks because it was able to take out things like Sarah Angel and other big, expensive finishers for those other types of decks that only had 1 or 2 ways to end games. It really changed the way people had to build their decks because if you lobotomied their 1 win condition, they couldn't win anymore, so they had to diversify a little bit, maybe having 2 copies and 1 copy of the various types of cards. And, of course, there's the cycle of Urza's Destiny uncommons that lobotomize various see, I just verbified it. Lobotomizes various different types of effects: Splinter, Scour, Eradicate, Quash, and the red one that destroys a non-basic land, Sowing Salt. There we go, which actually is the one that got reprinted in Betrayers and is the one that saw modern play. It's true. So that's a little embarrassing. But then it also became Cranial Extraction, Memoricide. The effect has been
Stay in the Mind, yeah.
Yeah, Stay in the Mind's another great one. Lobotomy is a very iconic old school card.
It's definitely got the old school cred. I would note that for me, the fact that I wasn't playing when Invasion was around, and the fact I came back when Champion showed up, Cranial Extraction to me is just kind of like that next step forward because you named the card. Lobotomy, they have to have it, and of course when they
have it in their hand.
Yeah, when they have it, obviously it's not only a blowout, it's like a monster blowout, and because they have 2 copies and blah blah blah. But Cranial Extraction could sort of proactively get anything out as necessary. It also was arcane for reasons that only mattered in like one Pro Tour.
Who cares?
It's fine, but whatever. Cranial Extraction's weird. But those types of effects are definitely iconic and fantastic.
Yeah, and there isn't going to be Cranial Extraction without Lobotomy. I mean, that's just I don't think. I mean, and it's also got an F&M promo. It's got the really iconic screaming face art. I mean, even if you haven't played with a copy of Lobotomy, you've seen that crazy art. Like Absolutely. It was multiple playmats. It was multiple like Wizards homepage backgrounds. Like it's that one's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on here to my number 6, which is also a fairly new card. There was sort of a couple of legendary creatures that showed up because Nicol Bolas showed up. And in our devastation, as it was beginning to devastate all the things, the Scarab God showed up.
Sure.
The Scarab God is a black, blue, and 3 generic mana for a 5/5 mythic legendary god. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life when you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. It also has an activated ability that says, black, blue, and 2 generic mana, exile target creature from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And lastly, when it dies, you return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. This thing does it all. It's a 5 mana 5/5. It could just be a 5 mana 5/5, and we're already talking about it.
In blue-black. It's a 5 mana 5/5 in blue-black. Yeah.
Right, which is unbelievable. And as of the recording of this video, the World Championships happened this past weekend, and this card was amazing.
It has cracked $40. It is now a $40 card.
Yeah, because when you would have the trigger of the scry and the lose life on the stack, and you would use its ability. You would say, okay, while the trigger's on the stack, I'm going to get back a hostage taker and take your stuff away. Or I'm going to do this and get rid of your Glory Bringer, and now it's a 4/4 zombie on my side.
Or make a 4/4 hostage bringer.
Yeah, hostage taker, yeah.
Hostage taker, yeah.
Right, and so not only do I have these 4/4s, you're also losing life, I'm also scrying, and if you ever kill the thing without exiling it, I'm going to get it back guaranteed. This thing is non-stop pain. This thing brings the pain, it doesn't stop the pain, and I think, more cards went up on my list because sort of iconic status and tournament status and, my own sort of preferences, but I can't deny how crazy, crazy good the Scarab God is.
Yeah, this was my number 9.
Nice.
I was watching the World's coverage this weekend. I was very impressed with it. If you'll remember, we were recording our main show. We were recording Magic Mics on Wednesdays when Wedge spoiled this. Mm-hmm. And I lost my mind live on camera. Like, I was there. I saw the tweet go out, and I was like, guys, you need to see this because this is insane. It's an EDH All-Star. It does amazing things in EDH. I think what really pushes this over the top is the fact that it can be any graveyard. This is a great win condition for the control decks that don't necessarily play a lot of creatures, but if your deck is 40 kill spells in this and you kill everything they have, you can bring their creatures back on your side and kill them with their own stuff. Like, who doesn't want to do that? I think if it was only your graveyard, I don't think it would be nearly as valuable, but this is definitely a card that people are making room for. The teamer decks are adding a 4th color just for this card. This is the card that is making blue-black control a thing, which I think people were, predicting blue-white to be. We had things like Cast Out and Fumigate, and people were going, okay, blue-white, here we go. And no, it's making control go to blue-black instead. So it's changing the way that people choose their decks and build their decks. And yeah, if this keeps up, I mean, like I said, I think it's $42 as of TCG Player right now.
Never going to go down.
If this keeps up, we're in for a hell of a standard.
5 mana sure buys you a hell of a lot these days.
Yeah.
It used to buy you Dirkwood Boars. That was in the creature color. And that was just a 4/4 that had no abilities. Now we're in blue-black, the 2 least creature colors, and you get a 5/5 that literally does everything you could ever want a blue deck, a blue-black control deck to do.
There was a time in which, if power and toughness equals your converted mana cost, you were suddenly one of the highlights in Standard and need to be spoken of. We need to figure out, how to best use this card. Yeah, because that rate's too good. Aaron, what is your number 6?
My number 6 is a core piece of the combo deck, which I've spoken of very fondly on the show many times, and a combo deck that I wish saw more play. If I had the cards and the patience to learn how to play it, I would 100% play this. My number 6 is Cavern Harpy. So for those playing along at home, it is blue and a black. It's 2/1, creature beast flying. When Cavern Harpy comes into play, return a blue or black creature you control to its owner's hand, pay 1 life, and return Cavern Harpy to its owner's hand. The deck that this shines in is a deck called Aloran, which is in Legacy, which revolves around the enchantment Aloran. And you basically get Aloran out, and between Cavern Harpy and a card called Parasitic Strix, you basically just form a loop and drain your opponent to death by playing the Strix, bouncing it with the Harpy, and then playing them both again at instant speed, because Aloran essentially makes these creatures free, and that's the way you win the game. And I have a lot of love for this combo. I have a lot of respect for this deck, and Aloran probably would not be a thing if it were not for this little innocuous blue-black Harpy making it happen.
And they had a whole sort of host of this sort of style of when it enters the battlefield, return a creature of a certain color, or it relies on certain colors.
Creatures.
Exactly.
Gating is what it was called back in Plane Shift, for those of you who weren't alive back then.
But a 2/1, a 2-mana 2/1 flyer, these days is like, whatever. But back then, again, you had oh my god, this is way above the curve, and how do we deal with this?
Right.
All right, so let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
I have to tell you a story. So I had a bunch of friends and I who played Magic at the lunch table in high school. Like, that was what I did at lunch, was, me and this group would play Magic. And we were like medium competitive. I mean, we were, 14 or whatever, so it's like we're not winning, we're not world beaters or anything. But one of my friends had a birthday party and invited all the lunch table crew over the weekend to go to the Odyssey pre-release. And that's where we would have his birthday party. And we all were going to sit down and draft this new set and have some fun. And I opened a foil Shadowmage Infiltrator.
Nice.
And I was the happiest kid. Boy, let me tell you. I opened, and then the rest of my friends were like, "You opened a what? Let me see it. Can I hold it?" And it was amazing. And until making this list, I'd forgotten that memory, and I was so happy that I remembered it. And this was a shout out to the old Darts USA crew in Columbus, Ohio,
nice.
on Main Street. But yeah, Shadowmage Infiltrator, famous for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is because I opened a foil one at a pre-release. So, colorless blue-black for a 1/3 human wizard. Fear, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
Right, so for those who don't know what fear is, it means it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and black creatures. Yeah. That was the thing.
The progenitor to intimidate. And this is actually better than Intimidate, because blue creatures can't block my Shadowmage Infiltrator. But yeah, Shadowmage, also iconic because this is John Finkel's Invitational card. Mm-hmm. When he won the Invitational, he got to have his image emblazoned for all time on a Magic the Gathering card. And the classic Devil Horns John Finkel on the art for all time until the reprint. But this was reprinted in Time Spiral as a time-shifted card.
With the artwork, with the original
artwork. The original artwork, yep, absolutely. It's been a piece of many winning decks over the years, not the least of which also was Fairies used to play this card out of their sideboard because there was pretty much no way to garner a card advantage in a lot of the matchups, and so you would bring in your Shadowmage Infiltrators to be able to draw extra cards, particularly in the mirror. And yeah, it's just a very iconic, memorable card for all time.
Now, in Modern Masters 2015, they decided to reprint it with different artwork. So right. the weird precedent of they've reprinted a lot of invitational cards, but they keep replacing the artwork. Well, when he was time shifted, it was still John Finkel on the card, which was fantastic. Now, for those who didn't who aren't aware, when Finkel won that Invitational, this was around the time where R&D had lost its complete mind, and sort of the just Urza's Destiny-esque had just passed, and so his design that he gave to R&D was Wrath of Linkith, which I believe is his name backwards, which is 2 white, a blue, and a generic mana, and it was destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated, untap 4 lands you control. Which is basically the most insane
free
thing.
Wrath. Yeah.
Free Wrath was the most crazy thing I've ever heard in my life. But those were the days where you were like, what if I just, my 2-mana artifact just tap for 4 mana because reasons? And they're like, that sounds great, let's print it. So, it was a pretty crazy time. It's awesome.
How much more ridiculous is Free Wrath than free Time Twister or, free Careful Study or free 4/5 for 7?
Exactly.
I mean, there are a bunch of weird things. In any case, the card he ended up with was quite potent, and obviously a big staple of all time, a memorable Magic card.
It was great, but it was overshadowed, and we'll find out what it was overshadowed by.
Indeed.
Later on, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. All right, so my number 5. I'll go ahead and talk about mine here. My number 5 is a Planeswalker. And for those who don't know, there's really only one blue-black Planeswalker. His name is Tezzeret. Now, the Tezzeret I'm talking about, they made a few versions of them. They made, like, the Master of Metal and the new one or whatever. And there's the Schemer, who still sees some play, but nobody rocked it like Tezzeret Agent of Bolas rocked it.
Yep.
That card is real and amazing. Showed up in Mirrored and Besieged. It is a black, blue, and 2 generic mana for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. Its +1 says you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact from among them and put it in your hand. The rest on the bottom of your library in any order. -1 target artifact becomes a 5/5 artifact creature. Period. -4 target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is twice the number of artifacts you control.
Right.
So if you go, hey, I'm playing this Affinity deck, and I play this Planeswalker, and I +1 to go find something cool that I may just very well play for free, who knows? The next turn, you're probably dead, just automatically, by counting the number of artifacts I have, doubling that, and seeing if I can live.
I still have nightmares. I've been on the other end of that, and it's terrifying. Like, this is one of the Tezzerator decks, if people like to use that name. I know Shota Yasuka putzed around with a version of this in Modern a while back, where you play all the Ensnaring Bridges, you play all of the prison-style sort of artifacts, you play a couple of the amulets, because why not? You need to make mana somehow.
Sure.
And this is how you win. You lock your opponent down until they can do nothing, and then you drain them with Tezzeret, and it's very scary.
It brings fear. The card looks amazing.
Nothing good comes from it. Like, when that card hits the board, you're just like...
Yeah. It's card advantage. It's a win condition. It protects itself. It turns your useless leftover artifacts into things that can attack and block really well. It's a win condition in various, like Chris Anderson won a Legacy Open with Tezzerator. I've even turned like Time Sieve pieces into 5/5s because like sometimes the combo is not going to happen. I'm just going to beat your face in. Tezzeret Agent of Bolas is my second most popular blue-black Planeswalker. Hint, hint. Spoilers for the rest of the list, but this was my number 8, and so we're finally checking off some of our earlier ones as well. Yeah, Tezzeret is a great card, and also I played one copy of it in my Lantern Control deck because sometimes you actually need to kill your opponent. Nice,
and I also like if you look at there's Tezzeret the Seeker, which was kind of was the very first version, and that was cute and all in Shards of Alara, but like this one, it's clear he is a badass. He is an agent of Bolas. He has turned evil. He is making things happen. Those dreads are full of evil. Yeah. Those are evil dreads.
Tezzeret the Seeker was passionate about his hobby, right? Tezzeret the Seeker was like, I like artifacts. And Tezzeret Agent of Bolas is like, I still like artifacts, but not for the same reasons. I like artifacts because I can use them to take over the multiverse.
Yeah! That's what I'm talking about. So, Aaron, what is your number 5?
If you would have told me back in the day that there would be a card from Dragon's Maze that would see vintage play, I would have told you were nuts. Cut to current date and time. There is a deck floating around called Grixis Thieves. And part of the reason that deck exists is because of my number 5, which is a little something I like to call Notion Thief.
Yep.
Notion Thief is 2, a blue and a black. It's a human rogue, 3/1 with flash. If an opponent would draw a card, except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So this was a really nice answer to all of the Sphinx's Revelation decks that were floating around at the time. In a format like Vintage Raven Legacy, where Brainstorms, Ponders, Ancestral Recall runs rampant, this is a really neat way to sort of put a damper on that. A very nasty trick that is seeing play right now is to pair this with Dak Faden. So you do Dak Faden targeting the opponent. They don't get to draw any cards, you do, and then they have to discard 2 cards. And so that's the neat sort of tech going around Vintage right now, which is broken. And this card makes it possible. It's this card combined with Dak Faden, and I just can't believe that this is happening. Like, I just would have never guessed that this card would be good enough to see Eternal play, and here we are.
I mean, it was 4 mana, right? When it first showed up,
Yeah.
it was like
4 mana, 3/1, yeah.
right. You're like, oh, this is the Brainstorm killer, but 4 mana. You know, it's like, no, it's still crazy brutal.
Right.
And if it's not in their draw step, they don't get any cards. They get nothing. So Brainstorm, I draw 3 and you put 2 on top of your library. That's the trade we're doing for 4 mana.
Right.
It seems all right.
So I'm a part of a Magic the Gathering meme. In which the weekend that Notion Thief came out, the finals of the Legacy Open was a Stoneblade mirror between Justin Uppel and Lauren Nolan. And Justin Uppel, a powerful young mage, cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor and attempted to zero Jace the Mind Sculptor. And Lauren Nolan said, "Hold on, please, I have effects." Played a Notion Thief, ended up with 3 cards in his hand. Justin Uppel put 2 cards from his hand back on top of his library, and Lauren Nolan also got a 3/1. And I'm sitting there trying to type up the match report while Jeff Foster, notable Judge Jeff Foster, is cackling wildly directly across the table from me. Justin Uppel has his head in his hands. Lauren Nolan just can barely contain himself with the smug grin on his face. There are many Magic the Gathering memes, but this one is the one that I'm a part of. And so that leaves a special place in my heart for Notion Thief.
I found the image. If you Google Notion Thief GIF, which is how I found it. It's not a GIF, but whatever. Right. The point is, it brings up really quickly, and there's just you over there, like just got your hand on. I don't know how to explain this.
Of the 4 of us, I'm the most professional, and that should tell you something.
So good. This card is full of blowouts. It is a blowout producer, and that is always fun. All right, so Ruben, what is your number 4?
We're going to go in the Wayback Machine. Erin doesn't like the set Alliances, so we can ignore her for this particular section of the conversation. You can go away. You had yours time in 9, 8, and number 7. We had the Aaron Campbell show already. Evan, it's time for Alliances talk right now.
I know, buddy. It's Lim-Dûl's vault, isn't it?
It's Lim-Dûl's vault.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'll have you know, the boyfriend loves this card. I'm not even clear as to what it does, but he has turned down playing good decks because it does not have this card. Vault? Yeah. He begged me to put this on my list, and I was like, baby, I don't even know what it does.
I'm going to try to help you. Lim-Dûl's vault is an instant for a blue and a black.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 2 mana. And it does something similar. I'm sure you played like Peer Through Depths before or Impulse or something like that. It's like that, but on steroids. It is like out the wazoo, crazy potent. So what you do is you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
All right. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life to put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order, and then look at the next 5 cards.
Okay.
So if you look at
So you have to not like every one of those 5. You don't get to keep any of them.
Right. So you look at the top 5 and you go, I don't like the way, I don't want to play with these 5.
Okay.
Put those on the bottom, pay a life, look at the next 5.
Okay.
I'm not sure I like these either. Put those on the bottom, pay another life, look at the next 5. You can go through an entire 60-card library for 12 life.
Okay.
Which means that you get to basically search your library for the card you want in a combination with the other cards you want for some amount of life. Then you shuffle your library and put the 5 cards that you like the makeup of on top of your library in any order.
Seems good.
You tutor up the 5 cards, or the 5 cards you like the most.
Of
those, and then you say, okay, fine, I'll shuffle the rest of it, and then I'll put these 5 right here, and you stack your draw.
Right, exactly. And basically, this is one of the most potent instant speed tutors for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is you can just run this in a control deck that has lots of repeatable effects and just stack the top of your deck at the end of the turn. And then if you find 5 lands on top and don't want them, then you can pay 1 life and find some spells. But this really shines in combo decks. You really are like paying 3, 4, 5 life to find your final combo piece, stack it in the order that you really want, and be like, all right, I've got both combo pieces in these 5 cards. I'll put those on top. I'll play a cantrip, draw both combo pieces, and go off.
Yeah.
Lim-Dûl's Vault is just an insane Magic card. Super complicated, obviously, and they had to change the text and change the wording when they reprinted it in Commander. But it is no joke when you actually get to play with it.
Yeah, it's kind of a word soup when it showed up in Alliances,
Sure.
and it's even talking about effects that prevent or redirect damage can't be used to counter this loss of life, which was kind of a thing for a long time, which I'm so glad is no longer a thing. And I think a lot of people kind of looked over Lim-Dûl's Vault, at least as I recall back in the day. It wasn't a huge standard player because it sounds cool, but there weren't really any combo decks yet. They really hadn't got going at that point. But later on, as more and more enablers and more tutors and things showed up, the power of this card began to get higher and higher. So it was nice that they reprinted it for Magic or for Commander 2013, which was cool with some new art, which is nice. But yeah,
and non-word soup text.
Correct. Things that make a lot more sense. But that's okay, because I'll always think of the Alliances one, and it has the place in my heart of being an awesome Alliances card.
Yeah.
Even though Aaron may not know, maybe one day you should try it out. Just,
The
hey,
power of Alliances.
Just be like, yo, I want to play with a mono Alliances, Ice Age block, do something crazy. Nobody can control you.
Sounds great.
Aaron, what's your number 4?
My number 4 was a format-defining card. The format being standard. It was the linchpin of not one but 2 different standard decks. In a format where pips matter, this card was all the rage. My number 4 is Nightveil Specter. This card was this card played a major part in the rise of both mono black and mono blue because of its mana cost. Again, it had the split mana from Gate Crash from Return to Ravnica block. So you can pay any combination of blue or black mana to do this. So the mono black decks were using it, the mono blue decks were using it. And that's 3 devotion in a format where devotion mattered with Nykthos and the Theros cards. It's a 2/3 Specter, so it's continuing the tradition of the hypnotic specters, the entropic specters, and things of that nature. Flying, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of his or her library, which is pretty great by itself. Then you read the third line. You may play cards exiled with Nightveil Specter. So you're very likely to get some lands. You can play those lands and say that your opponent is playing a deck in colors that you don't have. Odds are you're going to find enough of those lands to where you can start to cast those things. This card was absurd. This was a huge player. It was a huge part of the reason those decks were popular. And I don't know anybody who looks at that card and still doesn't shudder a little bit as to, no, because that standard, you either really, really loved it or you really, really hated it. And it was just a perfect mix of, it was an older thing with the pips playing really well into devotion. I don't know if they intended it that way, but it had a major impact on standard, and that's why it's my number 4.
I think so, because, and you can see if you go through, like, for example, you go to MTG price, and I've pulled this up here, the price chart for Nightveil Specter is nothing, oh my god, it's worth infinite, and then now it kind of goes back to nothing again, because as soon as devotion showed up, Boros Reckoner and Nightveil Specter blew up. Neither of those cards were basically seen as playable, and then all of a sudden we care about mana costs, and oh my god, Nightveil Specter is amazing, and shows up in everything.
Right. To say nothing of Frostburn Weird suddenly showing up in decks.
Right.
It's true.
Nightveil Specter was my number 7.
Nice.
I sign off on everything that Aaron just said. A staple, 4 of in the 2 most dominant decks from Theros block standard. I mean, there was almost nothing you could do with standard that didn't involve Nightveil Specter, even though it had that crazy mana cost. The memories that I have that are the best of Nightveil Specter are actually not in either of those decks. They were during a small magical period of time when the blue based Aetherling control decks would sideboard Nightveil Specter, because you would sideboard out all of your removal. Because the mirror was all about Aetherling at that point. There were no creatures, so everyone would side out their Azorius Charms, and they'd side out their Supreme Verdicts, and they'd side out all their removal, and then you'd sneak a Nightveil Specter in there on turn 3, and then that would just win the game for you, like by itself. Yeah. It didn't even need to do anything. Like, you didn't need to cast any of the spells. It didn't need to garner card advantage. It still did, but a 2/3 flyer on turn 3 was just good enough. And so that's one of the main things I remember about Nightveil Specter. And now reading the card, I realized that it had ingest before ingest was a thing, which is cute. But yeah, Nightveil Specter, I have a ton of great memories about Nightveil Specter. The fact that it lived in a standard environment where 3 toughness wasn't that big of a liability is a thing. Yeah. Because most of the time you either bounced it or you cast Hero's Downfall on it, or people made you sacrifice it. But it never got bolted, and it never got like last gasped. So it lived in a fortunate time for its effect, but boy, did it have a potent effect.
I mean, also the fact that Thoughtseize got printed, and that was a card,
well, that too, sure,
helped out.
Look, everybody looks good when you go turn 1 Thoughtseize, right?
It's true.
And then you go turn 2 Pack Rat, and then they kill your Pack Rat, and you're like, oh well, still had all these Nightveil Specters.
So, my next card here is one that I think over time eventually became tournament playable. I believe in different ways. You guys, I think, may know better than I do. But what I do remember about this card is that when it showed up, no one really gave a crap about it. And absolutely no one cared, and it was a crap rare. And as time went on, casual players made this card what it is. Casual players made this card worth like 20-something, 25-something, like $30. And you're like, why is Glimpse the Unthinkable so much money? I don't get it. They just reprinted it in Iconic Masters, and it's a $20 rare over there. Glimpse the Unthinkable is a blue and a black, a rare from Ravnica, City of Guilds. It's a sorcery. Target player puts the top 10 cards of their library into their graveyard. That's it. The end. Done.
It's the end.
You're done. That's what you do. And if you like mill decks, which a lot of casual players love, millstoning, milling all the cards, whether you wanted to reanimate things, for example, or you just want to run your opponent out of cards, Glimpse of the Unthinkable was the card for you. And this was easily one of those things that it snuck up on everybody. Just over time, just got more and more expensive. And then one day you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
How is this worth that much? It was crazy.
The mill devotees are passionate, and this card, I think Iconic Masters is the first reprinting. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, this card just hadn't been reprinted, and so I wasn't surprised. I know I personally know several people who are very hung up on the mill lifestyle, and there's just certain things, like the casual folks, they love them angels, they love their dragons, I remember when Sublime Archangel is still really expensive after all these years. Why? Because the casuals love it, and there are just those cards that you or I don't understand it, but damn it, they love their cards.
Was this ever see constructed play, Ruben? Do you recall this ever seeing constructed play? I don't.
There wasn't a mill deck in Standard.
No, not in Standard, but I mean, like over time in Modern, was it ever used at some point?
Oh, sure. I mean, every once in a while, there's like a Archive Trap, Glimpse the Unthinkable, Mind Funeral deck that pops up in Modern, Hedron Crabs, that pops up in Modern from time to time. Particularly good against Escape Shift decks. If Escape Shift is the best deck in the format, then milling your opponent's mountains is awesome. But certainly, there's whenever I see a card that has an inexplicable price tag, I'm like, oh, EDH. This card sees no play in EDH. Because if you thought playing basically the way I look at burn, or the way I look at mill decks is burn, except for your opponent starts at 60. And all your burn spells deal slightly more damage and can only target players. So this is like 2 mana, deal 10 damage to your opponent's library. In EDH, you start at 100. So it's even worse.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to have Glimpse the Unthinkable in your deck. Certainly a bomb and limited. I mean, if you have mill in your cube, I guess this is great. But I just could not figure out, why is this card $1 billion? Why are Mind Funerals like $5 a piece for uncommons from Shards, a set that a lot of people opened a lot of? This was weird. Glimpse the Unthinkable is super simple, super in line with what Dimir wants to do. And I remember the one of the things I remember about Glimpse the Unthinkable was this was right after Kamigawa was around, and so people liked making the joke that this had basically pronouncing the name like this was a legend from Kamigawa, calling it Glimpse
Oh,
the
that's
Unthinkable.
clever.
Nice.
And so that was an inside, probably just an inside joke with my group of friends. But in any case, Glimpse of the Unthinkable, yeah, casual all-star. I mean, that's when you say casual all-star, this is the card. This and Doubling Season are the two that you look to.
It is really the ones. So I know that we don't have a number 3, Ruben.
Correct.
But Aaron, you do.
Well, I do, but it's higher on somebody else's.
Wow.
Oh, no one has a number 3.
I can't.
Wow, we skipped
This is all
2
very
numbers.
Dimir, by the way, though. Like the Dimir traffic and like making people forget
Secrets.
things,
Right.
subtle manipulations. Like this is all probably part of their plan. Like somebody's pulling our strings here.
That's amazing. All right, well, fine. We'll go to number 2. All right, it's fine. It's whatever. It's cool. So I'm gonna pull up mine here because this one, when I first started making videos, in a few years in, it was a point in time in which I enjoyed trying to give like silly nicknames to cards, and there was like Nom Nom, and there was Captain Tickles, and all this other stuff. Well, at the time, I enjoyed the movie Friday, and in the movie Friday, there's somebody called Big Worm, but one of the characters says, they call him Big Perm because he's got like the hair rolls in his hair and stuff. And I was like, Oona, Queen of the Fae, is Big Perm because she's huge. She takes over the game. She was amazing in that block constructed PTQ format. Oona, Queen of the Fae, is a finisher's finisher. It is a 6 mana 5/5 flyer. It's 3 Dimir hybrid and 3 generic mana for a 5/5 legendary fairy wizard that, of course, has flying and X and a Dimir. So whatever Dimir plus X is, you choose a color. Target opponent removes the top X cards of his or her library from the game. For each card of the chosen color removed this way, put a 1/1 blue and black fairy rogue creature token with flying into play. Story time. I was playing for the top 8 of a Pro Tour qualifier in this block constructed format. And, I, of course, was turning people sideways with Kithkin. Kithkin was super fun, great, awesome, fun spells. And, of course, because of Shadowmore and the hybrid mana that was going on, a lot of cards would be, white and or blue that you were playing on there. And so, at one point, it became sort of like the turning point where the opponent like slams down the Oona, and I like attack through in any way, and I'm like, well, whatever, just go. And at the end of after I turn my guy sideways, they tap all their mana and they say Oona naming blue. Oh, I mean white. And I was just like, nope. Judge, I got. What am I supposed to do? It's a PTQ. Like he says blue. Waited 2 seconds. Says, oh, I mean white. And I was like, so they stuck with the blue. He didn't get any counter. He didn't get any tokens.
Oh, okay. I won that game. Did he hit 2 mirror weaves and a Thoughtwef Gambit and you still lost? That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. But no, I lost to Elementals in the top 8. It was great. Sure. But that was my sort of Oona Queen of the Fae story. She is, to me, one of the most iconic blue-black characters. I love the artwork. I love the effects, the abilities, and her status as, the queen of the fairies.
The art's beautiful. If you look at the art, there's just nothing like it. Christine Sprinkle cosplayed this at GP Vegas and just did a bang up job. You mentioned this. You mentioned your personal story, Evan. If you look at her story, she's got quite a great story as well. She is responsible for the auroras that happen on Lorwyn. The card, the Great Aurora, the green card that we all know and love. She is responsible for that. And how badass do you have to be able to create auroras? Like, the subtle manipulations that she did on the plane, and how she tried to, ensure that she was in power after the Aurora was coming. The way that she kind of battled with Marilyn and Reese and all of them. Like, this is a story I would 100% read, and there's just nothing not to love about this character.
This just makes me want to go back to Lorwyn even more. I've tweeted every once in a while about how the plane, like Evan has Kamigawa, Aaron has Ravnica.
I'd be fine.
Just Golgari, just the Underdark.
No.
Right? And mine is Lorwyn. I want to go back to Lorwyn. And Oona's a big part of that. Just having the big Mary Poppins poofy dress. It's one of the first cards I can recall thinking to myself, man, that feels like a legend. That is how you build a story in a card. Like, that is how you do it. And Lorwyn was really great at doing stuff like that. Her and Doran really solidified that for me. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Oona as well.
So, Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 was originally printed in the Ninjas Commander expansion with Vela of the Nightclad, which is not my number 2. Vela of the Nightclad's not my number 2, but shout out to Vela of the Nightclad. This was an enabler for your ninjas because it had flying. This was a decent defender because it had Death Touch. It only cost you 2 mana. And it was instant card advantage. It instantly got you a card because when it entered the battlefield, you got to draw a card. My number 2 is Baleful Strix. Boy, is Baleful Strix a hell of a Magic card. I can't think of anything I would rather do for 2 mana than cast a Baleful Strix.
Card is annoying as hell.
It is annoying as hell, is exactly right. It matches up so well with every card in Legacy. It trades and blocks Delver of Secrets. It trades and blocks Tarmogoyf.
Grizzlebrand.
It trades and blocks Grizzlebrand if you have enough permanents in play. Look, I've Death Touched an Emrakul. I don't know if you guys have, but that's a thing I've done with my life. He sacrificed 6 permanents, blocked an Emrakul, and killed it.
Check that off the bucket list.
Yeah, exactly right. This started seeing play in firstly, it started seeing play in the Shardless Bug decks, popularized by Jerry Thompson. It's just such value. I mean, and it's been seeing play in the format in which it's popular ever since it came out. Baleful Strix is insanely powerful. It could never see play. It could never be printed in a real Magic set. It's just too good and too small of a package. The Nils Ham art is just so iconic as well. Every time Nils is on a card, you know it's his. And this is the one, like the creepy, ghost owl. Is probably his most popular non-Thragtusk piece. And so Baleful Strix just has a place in my heart.
This is another one of those cards, we talked about Dark Confidant, Bob being one of those cards that people are constantly trying to find the next iteration of. And Baleful Strix is another one. I remember when Fathom Feeder was released in Battle for Zendikar block, the control players are really excited because they were like, is this it? Do we get Strix back? And it had like a minute, but then it never really took off. And it ended up not being Baleful Strix. Those are very big shoes to fill. This card is annoying as hell. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through all the trouble of reanimating a giant fatty and then thinking I've got the game, and your opponent's like, Baleful Strix. And you're just like, come on!
I dare you.
Especially when I've had like a field of Icarids, it really changes the way that you attack into things, especially when you do feel like you have the game. Nothing can turn a game around quite like dropping Baleful Strixes. It's just hella pesky. And it's an artifact too. A lot of people neglect that fact. It's an artifact. Why?
I've sacrificed many a Baleful Strix to a Tinker.
Absolutely.
It's value on value. It was my number 8 was Baleful Strix.
My number 3.
It's been reprinted 7 times, yet it's still somewhere a $3 to $4 card because 7 times, and it doesn't
in like 4
matter.
Years.
So this was your number 3, you said, Aaron?
My number 3, yes.
That is fantastic because it's just value. It replaces itself immediately. No one wants to attack into it.
It's so unassuming. Like, you look at the card and you're like, yeah, it's pretty good. But you're like, okay, it's a flying Death Touch Elvish Visionary. Like, Elvish Visionary is fine, but it's not a world beater. And this thing is just like the most powerful thing on the board whenever you cast it. It's like, how in the world did this happen?
What stops multiple Tarmogoyfs? Baleful Strix.
A Baleful Strix, yes.
That's amazing. Aaron, what's your number 2?
So, in the last few years, Wizards has been very open about the fact that they are looking to improve diversity amongst the cast of characters. And this is where the YouTube comments get mad at me with me and my agenda again, but I'm going for it anyways. Shout out to the YouTube comments, by the way. And so they've been trying to give us more diverse characters in terms of the storyline, and specifically with the Planeswalkers. We had Alesha, who smiles at death, who ended up being a trans character. But for me, it really got started, and they really put their foot down when they released my number 2, which is Ashiok, Nightmare Weaver. This is a genderless character. Ashiok has no gender. And so when they would describe Ashiok, they would just say, Ashiok. You didn't see a he, you didn't see a she, you didn't even see a they. It was just, Ashiok has plans. Ashiok's going here. This is what Ashiok did. It was just consistent throughout the text. It's a one blue and a black planeswalker. So 3 mana planeswalkers have big shoes to fill. Didn't see a lot of play at first. Comes into play with 3 loyalty. You can +2 it and exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library, which is fine. It's serviceable.
Cool.
You can -X to put a creature card with converted mana cost X exiled with Ashiok onto the battlefield under your control. So assuming that you've been doing this mill thing for a while, you would just kind of put the cards underneath, and when you found a creature that you liked and you had enough loyalty, you just play it. That creature is a nightmare in addition to other types. And then you can just I think it's 16 or -10? -10. Exile all cards from all opponents' hands and graveyards. And this is just a really slow burn kind of planeswalker. It took a while for it to get its footing. Surprisingly good against the red-green monster decks, which a lot of people didn't think of. Just being able to, when your deck is full of creatures, you're just milling. They have no real way to deal with it being in red and green. The art, Carla Ortiz, look at this art. You just have this sort of porcelain figure with this beautiful, flawless skin in this face, and half of it's smoke. Where's the head? We don't know. This is a character that people want to know more about. I'm so stoked for Ashiok to come back. I got really excited when we first started seeing glimmers of Kaladesh because I thought that Ashiok might have been Aetherborn. That ended up not being the case. But I'm so excited for this character to come back.
That's still my personal headcanon.
Yeah, me too.
I would rather that Ashiok be Aetherborn.
Yeah, but there's so many directions you could take this character, and I know there are so many people that are in love with this character. And it really did sort of, like I said, it really did kind of, this was the card that Wizards used to show that they were committed to diversity, and it really helped that people could point to this card and say, I know what that means now. When you try to have those conversations with people and they don't understand, specifically they don't understand, what gender neutral means, you can now say, oh, I'm like Ashiok, or like that's what it means. Right. And this card did a lot, and that's why it's my number 2.
I had this at number 3, personally.
Same.
And
I also have it number 3.
And if there is any player that I think of when I think of Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, Gerard Fabiano needs to just say, hey, can I just give everything up to Ashiok because Ashiok is his person, his planeswalker. I can't say it, homeboy or homegirl. It's fine. But Gerard Fabiano took this planeswalker rather, and I think really showed the power of this thing. Slamming it down on turn 3 against like a red-green deck or whatever. And you're like, well, I'm going to 5 loyalty. So you can either attack this loyalty count, or you can just keep attacking me and thinking that I'm not going to get an advantage over it. And then he would, turn over a 2-drop or whatever. And suddenly the red-green deck is like, oh my God, I can't give him a free 2-drop. And so it was just this crazy minigame would start with Ashiok immediately. And the power of this card showed itself over and over and over. It didn't start, I agree, it didn't sort of start there, but by the end of its sort of standard season, this thing was crazy, crazy good.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that a lot of people dismissed Ashiok at the beginning because one of the first things you look for with Planeswalkers is how does it protect itself.
Right.
And Ashiok doesn't protect itself.
No.
Until you realize that if you're playing it on turn 3, especially on the play, it goes up to 5 immediately against a deck like red-green monsters, like you were talking about. You get a Voyaging Satyr the next turn, or a Sylvan Caryatid or whatever. It's exactly what you want. I'm not sure I've ever beaten a resolved Ashiok when my opponent was on the play in any format. It is very difficult to beat, and I'm also not sure I've ever seen it ultimated.
That's a good point.
It is basic. It's basically +2/+2/+2. Maybe play a monster +2/+2/+2/+2. Mill you out for the rest of the game. Particularly potent in limited formats, obviously.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Ashiok is a spectacularly powerful card. Super high on my list. We have an average spot of it at 2.5, so that speaks to its power level. And I agree. When you call something the Nightmare Weaver, you want to learn more about that character, particularly with how unique Ashiok is in the lore of Magic. We're now up to 40 unique people who are Planeswalkers. Not all of them have cards, not all of them have backstory as deep as the Gatewatch, but we've heard of at least 40 of them, the most recent ones being like Angrath, who we know of existing on Ixalan. And Ashiok, among the people who we don't know anything about, I'd be most interested in learning more. So I'm excited to see when Ashiok pops up again.
Nice. So let's move, turn the corner here to number 1. Now, Ruben, I know we shared. However, Aaron, what is your number 1?
And I know what Aaron's number 1 is because it was my number 9.
My number 1 is a card that revolutionized. That's how much I love it. I can't even get the words out.
It's a revolutionary.
It's a revolutionary. It really is. So my number 1 is a card that revolutionized the way that we play Dredge in every format. It injected new life into Modern Dredge. In fact, a lot of people blamed this card for Modern Dredge becoming so powerful, and for this combined with Cathartic Reunion and Golgari Greatroll, obviously. It was a huge boon for Manaless Dredge, specifically in the Legacy format, and in Vintage Dredge, where you play the pitch cards, where you play Force Will and Unmask. You can pitch this card to either of those things. My number one is Prized Amalgam. This card was like, I was in The Lion King, and I was baby Simba, and I was being held to the light. This card was everything I ever wanted in life. It costs 1 colorless, a blue and a black. It's a creature-type zombie, so I'm already listening. 3/3. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard, or you cast it from your graveyard, you can return Prized Amalgam from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. So there's all sorts of shenanigans you can do with this card, specifically if you're dredging or you're milling yourself, and your Narcomy that comes into play. Triggers, Bloodghast triggers. There are things you can do with this card related to Dread Return. My favorite is sacrificing your Prized Amalgams to pay for Dread Return. Yep. And then whatever creature you just brought back is going to trigger all your Prized Amalgams. Nothing feels better than getting a chain of Amalgams where, one was in your graveyard, but the other one came after. It sees that, and then end step things start happening. It's just a fantastic card. It really did change the way that this deck is played, which is not easy to do. We don't get a lot of toys. But this card really helped put Dredge back on the map in many ways. Also, shout out to Geralf. Geralf in the art and in the flavor text. I personally think it kind of looks a little bit like a California raisin myself, a little zombie. But I love this card, and I think it deserves to be my number one.
Well, it certainly deserves to be your number one because you just won the Vintage Challenge with it.
I did, yeah.
So you can thank Prized Amalgam for being your homeboy, standing behind you, attacking for 3. I mean, super powerful card. Again, I had it as number 9 on my list. Very clearly to me deserves to be in the top 10 based purely on power level. Obviously it's mostly a dredge toy, and decks that try to mess around with specifically with that. It's a 3/3 for 3 as well. It's very powerful. And has an effect that we very rarely get to play with. So
it did see play in Standard in the emerged lists.
Right.
So people who are playing things with like the Gryphs and the Elder Deep things. My words
Elder Deep
escape me
things
today.
Yes, Elder Deep Friends.
The Deep Friends would sacrifice it to bring in more friends.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also saw play in the pseudo dredge Noose Constrictor Haunted Dead deck that was floating around a little while.
Absolutely.
Prized Amalgams just value.
It's a good card. It does all sorts of amazing things. However, Ruben and I share a number one.
I gotta hear this.
Well, there's a reason that while it was super cool to have Shadowmage Infiltrator, and Shadowmage Infiltrator showed up in Odyssey, they made this uncommon that just blew it out of the water. Not even close.
And the original story behind the finding this card was that people were play testing a blue-black control deck and didn't have enough Shadowmage Infiltrators. So they used these as proxies for Shadowmage Infiltrators because they share the same casting cost of colorless blue and a black. And then they realized that instead of just drawing a card, they could just kill their opponent
instantly
in one swing.
With Psychatog.
Psychatog
is a black, a blue, and a generic mana for a 1/2 ATOG. Discard a card from your hand, it gets +1/+1 to end of turn. Remove 2 cards from your graveyard from the game. Exile 2 cards in your graveyard, essentially, it gets +1/+1 to end of turn. So there are, essentially, you can go, okay, they're tapped out. I have 6 cards in hand. I have 8 cards in the library.
Every card in your hand is 1.5 damage at that point.
Jesus.
And it just took over everything. It was better than Shadowmage Infiltrator ever hoped to be because it could just literally kill you out of nowhere. And it had an entire deck. The Odyssey, of course, was built around discarding cards and getting value out of that stuff with Madness. And, I mean, it's just one of the best Madness enablers ever. Every card in your hand is a damage and a half. It wrecked. It ran Standard. It was the standard thing to do for years. There's a reason they've only reprinted it one time, and that was on Magic Online. Because this card is silly. And I don't think it's a big casual player because casual players don't like getting rid of cards in their hand. But for constructed players, it's exactly what you want. It does everything.
Right. Tog was maybe the most dominant standard deck since it was printed.
Sure.
I mean, it's close. It's certainly close with like fairies and affinity.
Right.
But Tog was the deck. Like, if you didn't have a plan against Tog, what were you doing going to the turn? And it's
Teeth.
weird because, yeah, Dr. Teeth, exactly. Also has an iconic nickname, has some iconic art on the original artwork. And it's weird because it was part of a cycle. It was supposed to just be this role player with all these other cards that, each of the colors had their own abilities, and each of these ATOGs were the combination of 2 shared color abilities. So you have Thanatog, which is the white-blue one, which has the blue discard a card effect. You have the black one, which is Sacratog, which has the graveyard effect. But you put it together with Psychatog, and both of the abilities work together so well that this was the win condition. It was just so easy to win, and every game was exactly the same. It was crazy. You would just like survive. You'd get to like 4 life. You'd cast Upheaval with your leftover mana. You'd put down a Nightscape Familiar. Then you'd play a Psychatog, and then you'd kill them with Psychatog in one swing. And that's what happened. Like, that was every game. It was so powerful. It could beat everything that got thrown at it. People try different strategies. Even to this day, you could try to throw different strategies into like a Pro Tour deck winning gauntlet, and I bet Psychatog would win a good percentage of them. This is one of the, if not the most powerful, either blue or black creature from 10 years ago. All of the other creatures on our lists are like recent. They're all Baleful, Strixes, and prized Amalgams. But Psychatog is 10 years old, so it's like 15 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And so it knew what it was doing long before anybody else knew what it was.
It was and it was Sarcatog for
Sarcatog.
But there was
I call it Sacratog because you sacrificed artifacts, but
right. Well, they kind of did this thing where they had a whole cycle of, they had Sarcatog, they had Thaumatog, and they had the Phantatog, and all of them had these.
Lithatog was the red-green one. I remember that.
Yes, it was. Lithatog was red-green, and they all had this weird sort of like, we'll take these abilities that are of each color and we'll kind of sort of shift them around. And then Psychatog was like, okay, well, I'll just be the best of everything, and win everything, which is what it did.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, with that said, those were our top 10 favorite Dimir cards. We want to hear from you about what card we didn't talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate from CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-hosts. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thanks, Evan.
And we're going to our final slide. So I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Visit our website at MagicMikesPodcast.com that exists thanks to our Patreon supporters, or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv/MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/MagicMikes, and on Facebook at Facebook.com/MagicMikes. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week for another top 10 episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.
I thought of a pun to end the episode. Do you want to hear it?
Go for it.
Without blue-black cards in my life, everything would seem a little bit dimmer.
Oh, God.
Wow.
You're going to have to look into the mirror and see yourself and look at what your life has become. I hope you're happy. I hope you're ready for that.
I'm beating my up already. I'm beating myself up already.
There's real pain right here.
I'm already black and blue.
Okay, because Dimir has 2 faces, just so you know.
I think we're out. I think we ran out of them.